It's you! You came back? Welcome back. It's quite humbling that you guys want to hear my story and what my medical journey has been like. So thank you for being here. I'm Megan. I'm sharing my impossible medical journey. I got injured back in 2005. I've already done chapters 1, 2, and 3. Today's chapter 4, but I've been at this medical journey for 17 years now, and I am sharing my story about how I went from a completely healthy athlete who made one decision to jump up to catch a football, and life changed at the drop of a dime, and now it's been medical. So, no further ado. It's 4 verse 1. 4 say there is a hip injury, and 1 says there is not. I tried researching doctors and only found 1 in Colorado. I live in Illinois. That's a problem. Not having any success, my dad called back the super specialist who said there was nothing wrong with me, to see if he knew of any doctors in the area. This doctor told my dad that he already had his expert opinion, but if he really felt it was necessary, he could bring me to go see Dr. K, who worked in another hospital right in Chicago. One of the best decisions that my parents and I made was going to see Dr. K. That day, I was at school. It was another day of school. It really hurt to sit, and the thought of go in the car to go drive to Chicago was daunting. My nerves were through the roof that day when I saw Dr. K. I didn't have good luck with doctors in the past, and I didn't want him to be like the others. I had to bring all of my records back from 2005, from when I initially injured my ankle, all the way to the current, so he could see everything that I have injured and how I got to where I am that day. When he walked into the room, I was already sobbing because of the pain, and it just was not a good first impression on my end. But when he walked into the room, he introduced himself, and he was nice. He then said something that threw me for a loop. He said, "How hard did you fall? Your MRI shows that you fractured your calcaneus. Your calcaneus is your heel bone." What? What do you mean I fractured my heel bone? I was told I didn't fracture anything, that I just had a really bad ankle sprain. Back with that ankle injury, I was told nothing was broken. This explained why I couldn't walk for those 5 months and put any weight through my heel. I told Dr. K I landed very hard. He proceeded to tell me he could see that. When he put my films up, he pointed to the bottom left of my MRI, not the top right, like the super specialist did. I told Dr. K that the other doctor pointed to the top right. Dr. K said, "So, how is this super specialist?" dripping with sarcasm. "You do have a detached posterior acetabular labrum. NFL players sustain this injury when they land trying to catch a football. When he examined my hip, he was able to move it in ways that aren't normal. I had way more range of motion than I should have. When I was standing and I put all my weight on my right leg, my hip was subluxating, which means it was partially dislocating coming out of the socket, out towards the back. He said surgeries needed in order to correct the problem. The first surgical date that was open was September 21st, 2006, exactly 1 year to the day of my injury. To this day, that baffles me that my medical journey starts September 21st, 2005, and a year later, I'm having surgery on my hip. So, September of 2006, I missed a week and a half of school. Surgery consisted of tightening the capsule in my hip and putting 2 anchors in the back to reattach the labrum to the bone. There isn't any type of bracing or casting that was used, just the use of crutches for 6 weeks. Recovery was difficult because anytime I had to sit or stand or the hip joint has to move. You don't realize how many times you bend your hip in a day, using the bathroom, taking a shower, getting in and out of a car, using the stairs, getting comfortable in bed. It sounds so basic, so basic, but getting comfortable in bed was one of the hardest things to do. No matter what I did, I would always end up having to move up onto my other hip, which was also just, you end up having to move. This is welcome to Meg's brain where she can't talk. I genuinely, after a certain spinal surgery, it became difficult to, it's hard for me to find words, and then I can't get the words out right. Let's try this again. September 2006. I missed a week and a half of school. Surgery consisted of tightening the joint capsule of my hip and putting 2 anchors in to reattach the labrum to the bone. There wasn't any kind of bracing or casting used. Nowadays, some doctors do use bracing to help protect the hip. Recovery was difficult because anytime you go to sit or stand, your hip joint has to move. You don't realize how many times you bend your hip in a day, using the bathroom, taking a shower, getting in and out of the car, using the stairs, getting comfortable in bed. It sounds so basic, but getting comfortable in bed was one of the hardest things to do because every single time my hip had to move. I watched a lot of movies and I worked on a lot of homework. When I went back to school, I started having a lot of shoulder and shoulder blade scapular pain. I remember coming home from school one day and telling my mom I felt like I was slouching. She noticed it and said to try to sit up straight. I couldn't. There was a lot of pain over both shoulder blades. I didn't want to use a wheelchair, so I continued using crutches. Little did I know this was one of the first major signs that I had a shoulder injury. Before I could even think about my shoulders, though, I had to focus on rehabilitating my hip. I started physical therapy 5 weeks after surgery. As I got better and therapy progressed, I was thrown for a double major loop. My right knee that had already had surgery and been operated on was giving way and would buckle. And my left hip was beginning to shift out of place as well. November 2006. When I saw Dr. K, instead of him saying, "This is impossible, you're making it up, this is all in your head," he told me I had to once again go for MRI testing. The MRI arthrogram of my left hip showed I had a torn labrum, which probably happened from having to support myself on crutches for so long. The knee MRI appeared normal, but the physical exam was anything but. My kneecap was now shifting towards the center of my body. Both my hip and my knee were going to require surgery. It was decided that I should have my right knee done first because I would need at least one stable leg to stand on in order to have my left hip done. I would be on crutches after the left hip surgery, and there was fear that my right knee would buckle, and then I would end up injuring myself. Up until surgery on my right knee in December of 2006, I had to always use crutches because one leg was always unstable. The crutches continued to make my shoulder blades hurt more and more and more. I eventually changed the way I was using the crutches by rolling my shoulders forward to get the weight of my backpack to sit differently. This relieved the pain and pressure, so I continued doing it. I now know that was the worst thing that I could have ever done. So here's a photo of my knee before my surgery. And if you look close, right here is my surgeon's finger, and he's pushing my kneecap in towards the inside of the body. And then after surgery, you can see that it's very, very stable. And there, my kneecap isn't pushed over here. Luckily, with the knee surgery, I had it done over winter break, so I didn't miss any school this time. I was on crutches for 4 weeks and began physical therapy once again. Therapy went great. Since I was progressing and wasn't having any issues with my right leg, I was able to schedule surgery for my left hip in March of 2007. In February, my shoulder blade pain was getting really difficult to tolerate. I played the cello in school, and instead of being able to hold my arm outwards, I had my shoulder inwards like this, trying to hold up the weight of my shoulder. This whole injury thing was taking a lot longer than I could have ever imagined. What happened to you'll be back on the soccer field in 6 weeks? I started coming to terms that I was never going to play competitive soccer again. This was very hard to wrap my brain around. I needed a new outlet for stress relief, so I started to take my drawing more serious. And I started doing my drawing not just for fun and not because I had homework. Drawing provided stress relief, and to this day, drawing is something that I do, and it's very therapeutic. I did not know that I could draw. March of 2007. When it came time to have the left hip surgery in March, I was dreading it. My shoulder blades were screaming at this point, and I couldn't bear the thought of having to go back on crutches for the next several weeks. Luckily, though, there ended up not being a labral tear in my hip. Instead, it was just a very, very loose capsule that needed to be tightened. At my post-op appointment 1 week after surgery, I remember Dr. K asking how I was feeling. I was completely honest. I didn't put on the brave face. I told him I felt awful and everything was hurting. My knee hurt, my hips hurt, and most of all, my shoulder blades hurt. That day I learned I needed to be careful expressing how I was feeling. Rather than acknowledge the fact that I had just had 5 surgeries in the past year and was still healing, Dr. K said, sometimes pain medication alters one's mood. Reading that, I love this doctor, but reading that, I just had to do a major eye roll. Excuse me. He then proceeded to ask if I was depressed. I said I wasn't. I acknowledged that depression can cause multiple symptoms, but that was not the cause of my pain. My hips and my knee hurt due to surgery, and my shoulders hurt because I thought they were injured. I then asked Dr. K, if I don't use the crutches, will I damage the repair in my hip? He said no, but most people use crutches for several weeks. With the reassurance that I wouldn't harm anything that had just been corrected in my hip, when I got home, I put the crutches against a wall and never went on them again. I would rather hurt every time I took a step in my hip as opposed to experiencing the sharp, stabbing, awful pain I had in my shoulder blades from having to support my body weight on crutches in addition to carrying a heavy high school backpack. I will never be able to go on crutches the rest of my life due to the extent of shoulder issues that were soon to follow. Bam! I almost dropped my camera. That's the end of chapter 4. My thoughts on reading it, I'm trying to avoid not saying that it's crazy, even though that's the first word that comes to mind. But it is, it's insane. And my surgeon that fixed my knee and my hips and further down into the story, like, he's going to repair my shoulders too. I still remember him asking me or telling me that pain medication can change one's mood, and asked if I was depressed. And I'm sure there was an element of depression, but it wasn't depression in the sense of like locking yourself in a dark room not being able to focus, not being able to like get tasks done. I was in school throughout all of this. I graduated on time. My grades improved because I studied more. So, I mean, that comment still kind of, so I gave it an eye roll because it still kind of is it's a little annoying. But the next blog, chapter 5, it is called The Hardest Blog to Write. I was going to be sent to an out-of-state hospital to receive treatment. And the things that happened, it was brutal. Not just on me, my parents, my family. It changed me a lot, and not in a positive way. I lost who I was. I didn't believe myself anymore. And these doctors and various other health professionals, they really got into my head. So you gotta stick around if you want to find out why it's called The Hardest Blog to Write. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe. And I will see you all soon to read The Hardest Blog to Write. So